right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back for our next session with Mallori Steele and Tino Simon. So glad that you're attending today, everybody. Carol was great in that last one. And I know that Mallori and Tino are going to be wonderful in this one. I've heard so much about them from Devin Torres, who helped curate the program for our event today. If you can, let me know in chat that you can hear me and that you're in. I just want to make sure that that I started the session correctly and that we're all gathering. There we go. Thank you so much. All right, excellent. So our two speakers, Mallori Steele, L&D leader, CEO of Growductive Consulting, which is an L&D consulting agency, and also Black in L&D. Can you talk a little bit about that, Mallori? Because I don't know anything about it. It's just something that Devin had mentioned.
Yeah, it's really quite simple. So Black in L&D is a networking professional group. We're on LinkedIn and Facebook. Facebook is way more engaging than the LinkedIn group. So if you join LinkedIn, join the Facebook group as well. And it's really just a space to, give career advice, mentorship, support, answer questions. There's no stupid questions. It's just a safe space to network amongst other L&D professionals. So there's a lot of L&D groups, but in 2020, I found it necessary to have this separate group for Black in L&D. And the summer that I decided to start the group was during the summer of all the George Floyd protests. And there was just a lot of discord online, and it was a sensitive time. And so started the group. The group has grown ever since. And if you're not Black in L&D, please still stay connected with me and the people within the organization, because we love allies and there's always ways to connect like this. So
love it. So just to clarify, you're the founder of Black in L&D?
Yes. Yes, it used to be called Black Instructional Designers. And then we were like, majority of these people are not instructional designers. They're just in the L&D industry. So we changed it to Black in L&D.
Awesome. And let's see, Zara is asking if it's open to people from any country.
Any country, as long as you identify as Black or African descent. Yes.
Excellent. All right, wonderful. Thank you for that. And then Tino Simon, 25 years of training and technology experience. So you are an L&D vet for sure. Been around for a while.
I'm an old guy, yeah.
Right. Currently focusing on global training program creation and management experienced with all phases of the ADDIE model, trainer development and impact evaluation. You probably know a whole heck of a lot about instructional design and L&D. And I'm so looking forward to the both of you in this session, 5 tips for engaging your learning audience and showing training impact. So I'm going to go ahead and hide myself from the screen and let the two of you take over. Thanks so much for being here, and let me know if you need anything.
Thank you. So I am going to share my screen, but I find it awkward when I cannot see myself and you guys can see me. So I'm going to go off camera and you will just see Tino's lovely face as we share. But as I do this, Tino, do you want to go into a little bit of how we know each other?
Yeah, actually, Mallori and I worked together at Microsoft, in fact, for quite a while. She was in charge of the Windows support training. I was doing the same work on the Office side. And it's really interesting work. And then to see it applied at kind of the scale that we were working at is even better. So we certainly have lots of tips and tricks for you. The hard part here was boiling it down to just 5 because there's only so much time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So that goes into just like Louis shared. So I am Mallori. Prior to Microsoft, I had a consulting agency. I still have that agency. But I was part of the tech layoffs, like thousands of others last month. And so Tino is still at Microsoft and I'm no longer at Microsoft, but we still keep in touch. And these are some of the projects that I worked on. And then actually, can you guys see my screen? Just confirming, Tino, thumbs up.
Yeah, at least great. For me. In the chat, can you guys let us know? All right. Thanks for the thumbs up.
Thank you. And
I love the interactive features, right?
Yeah, just making sure. In some of the tips that I'll share, Tino will share more about measurement and data on that side, and I'll share a little bit more practical tips. But these are the trainings that I implemented some of these tips in. So sharing to say these are kind of things that we are doing ourselves and not just sharing with you. But tip number 1, take it over, Tino.
Oh, I'll start. Yes. More context. Mallory, I guess, is the more friendly one. I'm more the metrics based person. So I'll start you off right away with the biggest focus that I've seen, well, not be present in a lot of the training that I actually see. Um, and that is a clear business metric based goal. I think the previous speaker, Kara, mentioned also that it's really important to have a really clear idea right away of what value are you bringing to the business? What is the metric that the business uses to measure that value? And in fact, well, the next slide goes right into the key things for a needs assessment. If you've thought about what are the key questions for training needs assessments, I've come up with these three, and I'm happy to take any other ones. But the most important one that I see is to answer to for yourself and maybe work with the business to find out what business metric are you trying to move, right? What is the actual thing that you're here to do? Yes, we measure completion. Yes, we measure learner satisfaction, but that's probably not why the business is paying you to do training, right? In my space, it's a lot of new hire training. The business metric there isn't how many people we put through training. It's actually how well do they do in their first month compared to the rest of their colleagues, right? Compared to the rest of their tenured cohorts. That metric and that focus essentially gives you the design for the training, right? If you know what gap you're trying to fill, what value you're trying to bring, your next question then turns into, okay, so what behavior moves those metrics, right? Business KPI are not moved by people knowing stuff so much as it is moved by people applying that knowledge in a behavior. So for skills training, most definitely, yes, knowledge is important, but the behavior, the applying of that knowledge in some way is really what's going to move that metric. So have a really clear idea of what do people need to do to move those numbers. And then thirdly, and really only thirdly, the thing that I see most trainings will focus on is the knowledge part. Yes, people need to do stuff. Yes, people need to know stuff to do those things. Yes, they need to have access to that knowledge. And yes, you should be telling them about what it is that they're expected to do. But that's not the ultimate goal, right? You shouldn't spend all of your training just telling them stuff. You should rather demonstrate what it is that you expect them to do with that knowledge and then give them a chance to practice. Right? That's kind of the flow. And that's something that you'll see me talking about here in another couple of tips and tricks later, because it does sort of flow together. But this is the overall view, right? Keep this in mind. What is the business metric that you're trying to move? What behaviors do we need to teach people to do to move those numbers? And then finally, what do they need to know to do those things that move those numbers?
Can we add in the chat? What would you add to key questions? Yeah. And then Tino just put them out because I can't see the chat, but these are Tino's top 3. Do you have any that you would add or adapt?
Yeah, what do you guys do? And we can't even call on people by name, can we, Mallory? We could use really like generic names. Hey, so James, tell us, how does this align with what you're seeing?
We would, but we won't. We won't do that to you guys.
Yeah. But yeah, if you've got other ones, put them into the chat. These are the ones that I use for pretty much any training needs assessment. So whenever a business comes and says, hey, Tino, we need training, I need these questions answered. And that then tells me my training design.
Awesome.
And we've got a couple of ideas here.
Oh, tell us.
Oh, let's see. They're all popping up at once. So now I got to scroll back down. What would success look like to the stakeholders? Yeah, absolutely. Right. That's the business metric. The stakeholders are already measuring something. You need to measure your impact in the terms that they are currently using to measure their impact. Right. So if they're using KPI 1, 2, and 3, then that's the KPI you need to measure yourself in as well, rather than just completion and learner happiness. Let's see a couple of other ideas. What was done in the past that did or didn't work? Oh, for sure. Right. And what are the ripple effects that may occur if training is not delivered? Oh, yes. We'll break if we don't do it. That's sort of the other side of why we do training, right? What if we didn't? And that's a nice way of getting at that business metric question too, right? What number will change to the negative if we don't do the training?
Right. I love the phrase ripple effect. Whoever said that. It's a very good visual.
Right. I'm going to have to borrow that. Yes.
All right. So going into tip number 2, skip the corporate jargon. So there is a poll that I would love for you guys to go over to the polls tab and answer specifically about corporate jargon. And so this is an interesting topic because it varies based on demographics. And so after you take the poll, I want you to go into the chat, and Tino's going to start reading it out to me and let me know how many generations are currently in the workforce.
Ooh.
And just take a guess.
All right, so into the chat, we want them to type how many generations in the workforce?
Yeah, it'll just be a number. How many generations are in the current workforce?
All right, we've got a couple. We have a 5. We have 3 generations. We have another 5. A few 5s. There's a 3. There's a 4.
Awesome.
4,
Yeah, so
5. So 3, 4, and 5.
Great. So the correct answer in the first time in modern history, there are 5 generations in the workforce. Just put in the chat what's the first one? 1925 through 1945. If you're born during that time.
Through
You are a what?
A boomer. Oh, yes. And let's see. Jennifer Bosworth said it first. She gets 100 points. We are gamifying this thing.
No, she doesn't, because it's actually a traditionalist.
Oh, man. Okay. So Jennifer, you get 50 points for being first.
Sorry. Okay, so 1925 to born between 1925 and 1945 is a traditionalist. Born between 1946 and 1964 is a baby boomer.
Ah, there's the boomer.
1965 to 1980. What's that?
Is it the Gen X? Because I see a few of them popping in the chat.
Gen X, yes.
Oh, yes.
1981.
All the Gen Xers.
1981 through 2000. I think that's an easy one.
The millennials?
Yep, millennials. And then the youngest, 2001 through 2020. So those born between that time frame are.
Is it the Gen Z? Because that's what the chat's telling me. So there's a reason in the chat.
There's a reason I'm bringing this up, is because there's 5 different generations, and our values, our beliefs, our worldviews, our lived experiences, our cultural differences, they make a difference in how we, move through training, how we experience training. And I say skip the corporate jargon because it does not translate across the 5 generations. And so here's a perfect question of what do these 2 popular platforms have in common? So TikTok, I don't know if I have any TikTokers here. TED Talk, people who enjoy watching TED Talks. TikToks are, well, it's changed now. They're still changing it, but typically the videos are 3 minutes or less, right? And in this one, hey, learn to cut a mango if you don't know how to cut a mango. And she is explaining it. She's going to demo it and maybe give you some tips. In the video that's 30 minutes or more, that video is, I forgot exactly what his topic is. I'm sorry, but
about cutting a mango.
He's not talking about cutting a mango. And let me say to everybody who may be, mango lovers, we're not saying she's right. Like, there's more than one way to cut a mango. This is her way. But what they have in common is these 2 platforms.
She's
very
different.
different.
I'm sorry, but somebody in the chat pointed out her knife skills are terrifying, and now I'm looking at it. She's gonna hurt herself.
They are.
Go ahead. Sorry.
But listen, she's like, I'm an influencer and I'm going to show you something. So this is what she chose. But the conversational interaction in both of the TED Talk and TikToks is what makes these 2 platforms incredibly popular. It's not overly complicated. The communication is quite clear typically, and you leave with something, right? So when it comes to our training and how we are writing training, right? Writing the content, the scripts, the assessments, etc., is to attempt to just push aside, which I know is hard sometimes when you have SMEs who become very technical and very corporate language, and they want things a certain way, is to approach the script writing in a more conversational style, right? Because you want to be able to engage your audience. It's considering your audience, the language and the tone of your writing. So when you're writing for, depending on your demographics, but if you're writing for an audience that is spanning across 5 generations, you have to focus on what the need is that matches for all of them, versus what we call self-hugging, right? Is when you kind of develop training based on what would work for you and your style or your tone or your language. And so really considering those demographics. And then finally, sorry, Tino?
Self-hugging. That's a nice term.
Yeah, we use that in gamification, right? Is when you're self-hugging and it's like, I like this and other people are going to like it. And it's not necessarily, right? And then finally, aim to make your e-learning content as exciting and engaging as a TED Talk or TikTok. And so, Tino, can you share some of the poll results from the corporate jargon? And actually, can you read or if you can post it to the stage?
Oh, so everybody. So we have a poll on the side. There's a little section for polls. And there's a poll that asks you, do you think the use of corporate jargon is necessary in training content? And if y'all can go into that poll, pick one of the three choices. One is yes, it adds credibility and professionalism. One is no, it's unnecessary and can be confusing for learners. And then finally, option 3, it depends on the topic or industry. Which do you agree with? Is the use of corporate jargon necessary in training? That is in the poll. If you're still in the chat and you're having a hard time finding the poll, put 1, 2, or 3 in the chat. Yes, no, or depends. And I'm not seeing any answers yet in the poll, Mallori. So let me switch back to the chat and see what folks are typing there. Is it necessary? Yes, no, or depends?
Just curious of what you guys are thinking.
Vic is mentioning that if we use jargon, we have to define it. Ooh, that's nice. Yes. And then Lita's actually seeing poll results. Lita, can you share which is the winner in the polls?
Yeah.
I'm not seeing the results. Or Lewis, if you're watching the poll. There we go. 35 people answered the poll. 77% said it depends.
Nice. Okay.
Thank you, John, for making that happen for us.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I agree. So because it depends on your industry, it depends on, again, I said like the demographics and how much jargon you're using. When I started at Microsoft and kind of jumping into reviewing training and storyboards, I was a bit surprised of how much corporate jargon was in the training. One, because it made the training longer than it needed to be. And then you create either, if it's virtual instructor-led training or instructor-led training, or especially e-learning, you just kind of get people who skip through, right? Click, 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 or they're a little bit disengaged. So it does depend, but when possible and when you can, the tip I would give you is to skip it. So
Melanie,
going over to yeah.
I was going to say, do you ever think people use jargon just to make themselves sound like they know what they're talking about?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that if we took a poll to see what generation does that, we would probably be surprised, right? So, yes, I do think that happens quite often. What do you think, Tino?
Oh, I totally agree with that. Yes. I think there's a difference between using big words to make yourself sound good and using precise words to get your message across, well, in a more focused manner.
Awesome. So going into my tip number 3, request feedback early. So going back to, again, starting at Microsoft and the way that surveys were put into, I'm specifically talking about e-learning training. In the beginning of the course, there would be a confidence survey, right? How confident are you with this topic, whatever topic it was? And then they would take the training. And then at the very end, it's like, here's a survey, take the survey. Survey results were quite low, which I was surprised. And kind of going in, I personally in the training that I managed started to do a few different tests and kind of, let's try this out. Let's try this other thing out and see what sticks. And so what had the most improvement with survey participation was requesting feedback early. So in the beginning of the training, in the introduction or wherever was appropriate, we would ask for feedback. And we would introduce that there's going to be feedback, right? So we would give a heads up and say, hey, there's going to be a survey at the end of this. And we want you to, whatever phrase made sense for that particular training. The main thing was to share our value, right? We value the time you're taking to complete the survey. We appreciate it. And so that way, when the survey comes, they're not just skipping through it or deciding, I'd rather not complete this. And so where it says silently acknowledge survey fatigue, again, speaking to a lot of training, right? Surveys are sent while you're taking the survey. And then, Tino, correct me if I'm wrong about the dates, right? I think it's while you're taking the survey, then it's 30 days out. There's another survey.
Yep,
And
30
then
to 60. Yep.
Yeah, 30 to 60 days out, there's another survey. And then I want to say at 90 days, there's
Sometimes we send another one. Yeah. So it's basically right after the training. So you can get a feel for how do people feel about the training. And then it's sometime, okay, 30, 60, 90, depending on the training, to see were they able to apply the things that they supposedly learned in the job.
Exactly. So survey fatigue is real, right? I think we all can, and not even just in training, just in this modern world, survey fatigue is quite exhausting. There's always pop-ups. Can you take a survey? And yeah, people skip all the time. I skip. And so to avoid the skip, being able to give them a heads up, share the value, and then introducing it again. So at the end of the training, before it's just like, okay, now we have a survey, we would have an entire slide that talked about why we want them to take the survey, and pretty much just kind of like, there's a phrase for it where it's buttering them up, right? We're just kind of buttering them up to say, we really appreciate it. We do review the survey results, and, we value your feedback. And so as a result of incorporating the heads up and the value message, the survey participation went up 70%. And so that's one area that I would say was a very helpful change in the way that, we incorporated surveys and the messaging in our training. And there's another poll I would love for you guys to complete. And I'm just curious with the audience. Tino, can you read it out for me?
I will go to poll number 2, which is, do you think the use of corporate jargon... Wait a minute. That's not the one. It's this other one. How likely are you to provide feedback on training or support if you're asked to do so? And choices are very likely, somewhat likely, unlikely, or never. So how likely are you to provide?
So I am somewhat likely. If I am in a space where I just want to finish, then I finish. I tend to, for example, if I'm on a customer service call and they ask me like, hey, do you mind staying on the, not the robot kind of pre-message when they say stay on the line to leave us, not that person.
You hang up on the robot?
No, I just wait for my turn to talk to the customer service representative. But if the actual representative says, hi, do you mind completing the survey? Or I was at Best Buy and, they print the freaking long receipt and then they put their name on it, right? But this guy, he put his name on it. He did a little star and he's like, I would love if you could, leave a survey for me and about my service to you. And he did a great job. So I think when you have a little bit more of a why this is a value to them, then I'm more likely to complete a survey. So what are the results, or what do you think, Tino, for yourself?
For me, I think once again, it depends. From the chat, I can tell you that Simone points out that if it's a bad experience, she's not likely to give feedback because she wouldn't even know where to start. I got to tell you, that's where I differ from Simone. That would make me more likely because I'm a cynical old guy. And if I didn't like it, I will let them know if it's bad enough. Usually little things, whatever. I'm maybe more like you, Mallory. If I have the time, fine, I'll do it. If not, I move on. Let's see. And then Christina points out that if she feels strongly either way, she'll give feedback. Yeah, I think I'm aligned with that. I don't know, Mallory, how you feel.
No, that's good. Everybody's a different approach. And so when you're working with a workforce of 5 different generations and you want to receive feedback from them, you have to kind of find different or creative ways to encourage them to provide feedback. And why should they spend their time giving you a feedback, right?
So you're tying it right back to the generational and to basically talking to your audience rather than just dumping a survey on them without even saying anything.
Exactly.
Nice. That is a good training design tip. And that actually reminds me of another training design tip, which is tip number 4. Whatever you're trying to teach, hoping it's a skill, right? Hoping it's a behavior. If they're not doing it, they're not learning it. If you just watch a video about cutting a mango, you're probably not going to know how to cut that mango, right after watching the video. Really, the way that you're going to learn to cut a mango is by practicing cutting the mango. That is the only way to learn a skill, is to practice it. Watching somebody else do it, watching somebody else talk about it, watching a video of somebody else talking or doing it, not the same as you actually learning to do a skill. That works with, well, okay, common sense things like driving a car. Like my daughter, when she learned to drive a car, I'm not just going to have her watch some YouTube and read a book. She's going to have to practice before I'm comfortable letting her drive my car around. Right? That makes sense. But then somehow when we shift to corporate training, we forget that entire idea and rely on really smart people saying really big, long words at you, calling it training and calling it done. That's not really effective. So hence my point, if they're not doing it, they're not learning it. It being whatever you expect them to do, that again, moves those numbers. That got me to thinking about, how do we even learn? Right? Is it practice? Is it watching a video? Is it whatever the learning styles that are now debunked that we were all so hot on 10 years ago? Is it any of those? It's sort of all of those. And in a way, okay, thumbs up if you guys have seen this quote before. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. A couple of thumbs are flying up. I love this one. I didn't come up with it. I checked on the internet. This is attributed not just to Confucius, but also to American presidents Lincoln and Jefferson, as well as Chuck Norris. But I went with Confucius because he was the longest to go, and that makes the quote seem, I guess, the most real. If you pick it apart, though, so I hear and I forget, that's a lecture. That's somebody talking, so you're hearing, and it's forgetful. I see and I remember, well, now they're adding something visual. They're adding a video to their lecture, maybe a demonstration, and that's a little bit better than just talking at them. But then finally, if you want somebody to understand something, go to step 3. Yes, you still have to talk about it. You still have to show it, but they have to do it. I do and I understand. That is training. And that is the difference then between a presentation, which is talking and showing, which is what we're doing now, and training, which is the people actually practicing. Now, to apply this idea to your training, you can essentially just remember those points, right? Demo, practice, perform. Demo and practice are the training. You demo the skill, right? The thing you want them to do that moves your numbers. They practice in the safe training environment, so they don't practice on a customer, so that they can get their first, kind of bad practice out of the way when it's still a low stakes situation. Then you put them on their job in front of a customer and they perform that same skill. And this is important. The same thing they practiced, they do on the job, meaning that you have to teach exactly what you expect them to do. Not just talk about it, not just sort of refer to it, not just give them general guidelines of how you expect them to do something, but be really intentional, really specific. Do this in this way. Watch me do it. Now I watch you do it. That's training. And then the job performance kind of comes by itself because they're doing that same thing that they're now confident in doing. There's me talking way too much. A couple of things in the chat. Somebody said about losing a finger. Oh, probably back to the cutting of the mango.
Oh, the mango.
Right? Spaced repetition. Yes, the more you do something, like driving a car, right, the better you get at it. Yeah. All right. So there's my tip and trick about training design. Whatever it is that you're trying to teach them to do, you have to show them and they have to practice. And then finally, to isolate the impact of all of this work, right? Now we're going to take it full circle right back to the beginning. We started by figuring out what is the metric, the business metric that we're trying to move. We then moved on to what is the behavior that people have to do to move that metric. We're teaching them that behavior by demonstration and practice in the training, and then they perform it on the job. Now you're coming back around to see if we moved that metric. And this is, Mallori, where we get back to the 30-day after survey, because you have to give them a chance to do the thing on the job, right? And then presumably you've, in the beginning of your needs analysis, figured out what is the KPI that the business is looking to move. Well, did it move any? Right? So 3 basic questions then to any 30-day post-training survey. And I like 30. I've seen 60, I've seen 90, but I think 30 days is good because the impact of your training will still be the greatest. But yeah, 3 main questions on our next slide. What do you guys think they are? Here's what I use for all of my new hire stuff. I'm very direct. I'm very straightforward. I'm straight up asking the people closest to the data, how much did training impact your first month KPI results? Whatever the KPI is that the business is measuring. Your learners should know what they're being graded on, just like they should know what they're expected to do. They should learn all this in training. So now it's fair for you to ask them later, hey, so in your first month, how much did training impact that result? And then to add a little bit of statistical confidence indexing to it, how confident are you in that estimate? Right? You can multiply these numbers out and get sort of a maybe a more pessimistic, maybe a more realistic number on that. You can average all of these out. You would also ask what other factors impacted your first month results. And that is so that later on, when you multiply out those first two numbers and tell the business that, hey, people are doing great, and most of that is due to training. And they say, well, how do you know that? How do you know it wasn't X, Y, or Z factor? You can say, well, X, Y, and Z factor didn't actually come up in our data. What did come up were these other two factors. But again, training was the biggest chunk. In fact, the overall result then, and I think that's about to be presented to you. Here's roughly what this can then look like as far as an impact summary. You could then report, as long as you know what KPI 1, 2, and 3 are, and those should have been provided in the beginning of your assessment. You could then say that, okay, business, in January, we had 338 new hires who in their first month, right after training, performed at 96.7% of the KPI score that we're getting from the rest of the business. So right out of the gate, they are performing on par with their tenured colleagues, right? And KPI 2 and KPI 3 and so forth, you can compare that to the last month and the month before. And then when they say, well, how much of that really great performance, Tino, really does go back to training, you can come back with the number and say, in this case, it was 85.3% is what our data showed. Now, you're not guessing on this. You have numbers, you have data. You have validated this data with the managers of the people that gave it to you to make sure that this also aligns with what they're seeing. This is a much better story to tell than just saying, hey, we did a bunch of training. A lot of people completed it and look, they loved it. Because honestly, I can, if I give you donuts and chocolate and coffee and things, I'm probably going to get a pretty good, score right after the training. But that doesn't mean that you'll be able to do your job after. This kind of result, though, it's much more speaking to what the business is actually funding you to do, which is to make sure that the new hires can do their job, right? And if you think about the purpose of new hire training, it's not that they enjoyed it. We want them to enjoy it for sure, but the real purpose is for the learners to be able to do their job as quickly as possible, right? That's what the learners want. That's what the business wants. That's what you as a trainer should then be delivering. And here's how you can do it, and this is how you report it.
So I would venture to say, Tino, that, and for all of you guys, just as an FYI, Tino and I have such different approaches to training, but we complement each other really well. And so I'm curious about this following up question, but I wanted to give that caveat in case it sounds like we're disagreeing. It's okay. But I'm curious, Tino, would you say that the initial survey, so I would say the initial survey, my stakeholders wanted to know the results, right? They had an actual interest in the results. The post-training survey was more on the business side. So that's still stakeholders, but not necessarily the SMEs. But the business side, I felt like that was more internal. So in our org, it was, to be able to show our impact. Do you feel like there is an equivalent interest in post-training surveys, the first one versus 30 days out versus 90 days out?
I actually think that historically, a lot of stakeholders have been conditioned to only expect level 1 surveys. So right at the end of the training scores, where people generally will say they loved it, 5 stars, I love it. 4 stars, I kind of sort of liked it. That's what we're historically providing to our stakeholders. And so they're just maybe not used to asking for this type of impact data. Once you show them this kind of data and the value that you're bringing to their business in the terms that they understand, which is their KPI, rather than your KPI, which is learner satisfaction, you'll see a whole shift in the relationship between you and your stakeholders, because at that point you're seen as a helper in their goal to achieving this, whatever KPI that they're looking for, as opposed to a cost center. There's my way too long answer, Mallory. What do you think?
No, it's great. What do we have in the chat? Any questions? opinions.
We have some. John is asking, what are the response items that I'm using for the question, how much did training impact your first month KPI results? I use percentages, 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and so on. As opposed to just being, more vague and saying kind of sort of a lot, a little, none at all. Give numbers. That way people can pick numbers, and then you have numbers to report. As opposed to being able to report later that we had a little bit of an impact. Well, how much is a little? Right? If you're reporting back numbers, that's a whole lot more, I guess, business-like, if you will. Oh, and then you might wonder, well, how valid is all this stuff? Right? Because that's usually what management will at first ask me whenever I give them something like this. They know, how do you know this stuff is actually working? This isn't anything that we invented. This has been around. This is more or less an industry standard thing based on the Phillips ROI methodology, used in companies all over the place, governments all over the place, large and small, and you name it. But we were still curious for my organization, well, how much does this approach work for us? So we actually had our engineering research unit write a couple of white papers after they did some reports and research, and they found that this approach works really, really well, actually, at isolating out the impact of your training among all of the other things. Because the other cool thing here is lots of things could have happened in that month that would have impacted their performance.
Right.
By comparing the performance of your new hires to that of the rest of the business, you're filtering out a whole lot of those other variables, right? If it was a slow month, if it was a fast month, if it was, understaffed, overstaffed, what have you, all those factors would have affected both of those groups, the new hires as well as the tenured people. So then by showing this percentage of comparing one to the other, you're really just focusing in on kind of the impact of the training. Let's see, other questions. Oh yeah, QA, there we go. If you guys have questions, or if there's any of these tips that you're currently using, put that in the chat. We have one question. Who are the sources of the data that I would trust to give me valid KPI metrics? As far as isolating the initial KPI, I asked the stakeholders, what is it that you are reporting on? And then as far as asking how much did training impact your first month, we're asking the people closest to the data. So in this case, the learners themselves who did that performance, who were really the only ones who would know, how much did training impact how I did that month, right? And what else impacted how I did that month? Maybe I was just having an off month, or I really hate my manager, or everything was great. So yeah, we're definitely asking the learners themselves who did that performance, who would know, right? I wouldn't ask people who are farther away from the data. And let's see, then I guess it would vary depending on the org, but perhaps there's a general approach. That would be my approach, right? Ask the people who would be closest, who would know. Are anyone's stakeholders totally uninterested in metrics, is Gabe's question.
Yes. Yes and yes. And that's why I asked that question about kind of post-survey. Yes. And that was kind of a constant, disconnect between, the business, meaning our org, the organization, and wanting for us to show measurement and impact and, impact on KPIs versus stakeholders that just needed to get from A to Z. And this is the case when we are having like very tight deadlines, when we're working on a confidential project or release. And when you start to, ask these questions in the beginning, right? You're doing your analysis and you're trying to identify what metrics, do we need to track? And they, a lot of times, are disinterested. So I would say, yes, I've encountered that a lot. What would you say, Tino?
I would say this is why we're perfect together, Mallory. Well, you bring the fun and you bring the, sure, we can help you out. I would bring but what metric are we measuring by? Oh, we want them to be, whatever, good at their job. Okay, great. What metric are you currently using to measure that? I'd be that guy. You'd put the smile on my grumpiness. Right. You're also, I mean, in case you guys don't know Mallory this well, she's also the person who gamified. What's the title that you have? She's like a level, whatever it is, master of gamification. And she's the most engaging and fun person you're ever going to meet. And that's, it was just such a great balance to have kind of that to kind of balance us out with, because I am completely the other one.
Tino's like, go read this article. And I'm like, let's create an engaging interaction instead. Right. Yeah. Any other questions in the chat?
Let's see here. How did we get, oh, and it scrolled a little bit. How did we get performance review documents for employees for validation and collection of data? The business is already tracking the business's metrics. So you ask the business to tease out their overall metrics to show you the results of the people who are in their first 30 days of doing whatever the job is. So I wouldn't get it myself. I would ask the businesses, wherever the business gets their numbers, that's where you should use yours, because then you're trustworthy. If you're the person who sort of invents this yourself, they're not going to trust you. But if you say, hey, according to your dashboard, here's what it is. And hey, I asked your data people to split out the numbers on your dashboard into first 30 days on the job and everyone else, then it gets a whole lot easier for them to make sense of your numbers.
Yeah, I want to bring up over in the Q&A. Thank you, Judy, for sharing. So Judy shared, we also look to managers to mentor new hires. We don't expect them to be completely running when the complete initial onboarding. How would you factor this in? Meaning regarding to managers mentoring new hires, and that's for you, Tino, or a peer integration mentor assigned.
Ooh, I'll let you answer first while I ponder my answer.
So this is tricky, and I would say only because based on our audience. So when you are managing a training program where your audience are employees, then it's a lot easier to have this type of mentorship, peer integration, and kind of combining your training. When you have outsourced work, outsourced talent, and that is who is consuming your training, that's your audience, then we don't really have a say on mentorship or peer integration. And so with these particular metrics, we never made that part of our process, so to speak. And I would say even venturing to like the commercial side on when there are full-time employees that I haven't seen manager to mentor support, but there has been like the buddy system. So like, hey, you're going to go buddy up with this person while you're kind of learning your job, but it's not the same as a mentor. But that's what I would say. But I think the concept is great.
I will totally build on that. Yes. Usually what we'll end up doing after the training is not just put the person right on the job and just sort of push them into the pool and say, off you go. But rather we will peer them up with somebody else who's doing the job. So at least for the first few days, they have somebody right there to sort of watch them and make sure that any questions that do come up will get answered right away. And then after a few days, we sort of move that aside. And then I'll build out also that is why the question, how much did training impact your first month result, is deliberately broad, right? So that peer interaction, that mentoring, whatever happens after the training room, but still while you're, in sort of a nesting period, if you will, of your job, would be part of the training. And we would make sure that that is included and that the people who are mentoring know what their job is and kind of that they're here to help this person. So I guess yes.
Zara asked, sorry, I want to get this question as well. Zara asked, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. How do you measure or count the other impact, and how do you factor positive or negative impact?
Yep. So the other impact would be that question of what other factors, right? And so for that, I'll usually give like a list of possible answers that I've seen in the past, just to get them into a mindset of here's the kind of things we're looking for. It'd be a free text field, could be staffing, could be tools, could be resourcing, could be whatever, right? You don't want to lead them to any specific things so much as you want to lead them down into a mindset of what you're looking for. And then I don't look at how many, like percentage wise, things come up. I will, however, look at how often something comes up. Like if, I will then know that, training was this much of that first month performance, and other factors include X, Y, and Z, with management being listed most often, or staffing, or whatever it is, right? Tools, or whatever the things are. That's how I wouldn't go into what are the actual numbers on that, because I'm the training person. I will, however, be able to tell them what other factors came up in the data, so that when they say, well, what happened to the new breakfast thing we rolled out? Well, sir, that didn't come up at all. Here are the things that did. But that's really as far as the data would let me go.
So another question is, did you use performance review documents of employees for validation or collection of data?
No.
And I will,
HR, I don't think would love that.
yeah, I would add, even getting data sometimes is incredibly difficult, right? Just actually getting some of the data and KPIs and some of the things that the stakeholders wanted to know that aren't kind of the top KPIs, right? It's like time to close this call or time to resolution, or when they wanted to know a bit more, it wasn't always straightforward to get that data.
Yeah. What we do know though is how the business overall did in their KPI, and then by splitting out the 0 to 30 group, we have their results. And then as far as driving high return rate to your survey, to your point earlier, 30 days or 60 days after, and again, I go with 30 because it's easier to really see the connection between training and the performance. I make sure that their trainers and the managers of the trainers know that we're looking for this number. And I usually will tell them how we did last time. Hey, last month we only got, 20% of these back. Let's, is there anything I can do to help? Let's see if we can make that number go up, because we do need as much data as we can get. We can only report what we do get back, but we can try to get it as complete as possible.
And I will add to Kim, so no XAPI then. So this, this topic, which I learned a lot at Microsoft. So the LMS that Microsoft has multiple LMSs. The LMS that Tino and I had access to does not support XAPI. So no, it was not an option. In what all the things that we're talking about, it wasn't an option. And that's, surprisingly the case that you'll see it a lot of larger orgs. They have been using the same LMS for some time, and to try to successfully transition is a big feat. So no XAPI.
Yeah.
And let me go back to the QA real quick. And I know Luis is coming back on.
Luis with the orchestra. I think we're getting played off, Mallory.
If you could change anything about your current strategy on training analysis, what change would you make today? And how do you deal with survey fatigue? So Tino, if you can change anything about your current strategy, Tino's not going to change anything. I'm just going to say
I'm going to expand it. I'm going to expand it to all of the businesses that aren't currently reporting on the value that we bring to the business in the terms that the business understands. And that is the big takeaway, that if you remember one thing, it's know what business metric you are moving. Everything else falls in line right after that. But as long as you report to the business, hey, I moved this metric this much, they see you as well valuable.
I don't know who said it earlier. Someone said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's Tino. So I would change stakeholder and SME onboarding. I would implement a real L&D onboarding for stakeholders and SMEs, because I think that's the disconnect when it comes to metrics. But go ahead, Luis. I know we may be over time.
No, I wanted to get to Cindy's questions just to wrap it up. But how do you deal with survey fatigue?
Have less surveys and make sure the managers are reminding their people to take the survey. So it's not just you doing it. If they hear from their boss that the boss would really like them to fill out the survey, and have they done it yet, they are much more likely to fill out the survey. But have less surveys. I have one survey at the end of new hire training. It used to be we'd have like 50 of them, one for every single module. We never did anything with the data. So we cut all those out, have one at the end. Mallory?
Love it.
I would say gamify or find a way to make surveys more engaging. Surveys are incredibly boring, and the phrasing is annoying and boring, and it's just, yeah. So I would say less surveys. I agree with less surveys, but when you do have a survey, to find a way possibly to just gamify it or make it more interactive, especially when it comes to UX UI, because I think you'll have more engagement.
How often do the two of you present together?
We don't. This is the first time, right?
Right.
Really? This is like a show. You
Is
guys
it?
you really work well together. You need to do the conference circuit. I would definitely hit up your session if you guys were doing the conference circuit. I loved it. It was fantastic.
Did some meetings together, like we did our trainer meetings together, but not a presentation.
Well,
Yeah,
Louis,
no.
book it and we'll be there. How about that?
All right. I'm gonna just I need to host a live event just to have the two of you there. So
Oh, thank you.
that's great. No, thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed your session. It was fantastic. And if you ever want to do this again, just hit me up. I would love to have you back on for a TLDC event. It was there's so much value in this one. Yeah, there you go. Gamified surveys in a TLDC session idea. That's a great one, Cindy.
Yeah, don't get me started.
Yeah. All right. Well, I really appreciate Mallori, Tino, for taking the time to doing this. I'm so glad that Devin introduced the both of you to us, and I love it. I know that everyone, the recordings are going to be gated, but this particular one, I think we're going to have to post this one because so much incredible information. You were really sharing some valuable stuff, the two of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And with that one, I am going to go ahead and end the session. And then next up is Rick Jacobs. So make sure that you come back for that one. We're going to be starting that one at the top of the hour. All right, everybody. Going to go ahead and close that out. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, you guys.